Okay. Hello and welcome to Muse Jam Session recording 169. And as far as I am concerned, this is my last recording for a little while because I am going to take some time off after our Adobe Max event. There will be other folks on the team that will carry the torch, but this is it for me for a little while. My name is Dani Beaumont, and I'm a Principal Product Manager on the Adobe Muse team. I am joined today by Lance Bouchard, who is one of our senior engineers on the team, responsible for some of the amazing feature set that we have within Muse. He's working on some amazing new functionality as we speak, so I'm really happy to have him with us here today. And the way the world goes is if you can answer the polling questions on the right, it always helps for me to see who's out there. Lower right-hand side is where if I'm talking about topics that we would like to cover, that you'd like to see covered, specific to what we're talking about today, that's a great place for me to glance at now and again as we're working. Lance and other folks that know answers to broader questions can probably jump into the chat if you have questions that are being asked. I'm going to look real quick here at Alex's question. So Alex is saying, hey, we need a trick like in Illustrator, what they know is a smart object, where when you make a change in a photo in Photoshop, it updates as a link in Illustrator automatically. You'd like that from Muse. So, and I always have to be specifically honest. I worked on Fireworks for a couple sessions, and I use Fireworks more than Photoshop because I'm not really a web designer. I'm just a product manager. But in that, I may be wrong about Photoshop, but the behavior within Photoshop, there's the generator or the ability to save out images for Muse into a folder. If you make changes to that image and it updates in that folder, Muse will indicate in the Assets panel that a change has been made. If you close the file and reopen it and changes have been made, it'll give you an indicator to update those. Alex, are you saying that that's not sufficient? You want more of a smart object workflow? And if so, tell me a little bit more about what you want. Looks like Ali Pordelli might jump in and save me as well, since he lives in Photoshop a lot more than I do. I am going to jump over to start sharing my screen, and we'll get started with the session. As I mentioned, I will glance back to questions during the session, but feel free to shout them out. Lance and Ali, as well as other folks in the community, are highly likely to be able to answer them while I'm speaking here. So. All right, we're talking about photo-rich websites, and to be honest, what I do when it's time to come up with a new jam session is I look into the archives and see what I haven't presented for a long time. And this is one that I haven't touched, I think, I'm not positive, but it's been over a year. So I went into my old meeting notes to speak about those notes specifically. There's an Evernote document that I'm keeping. And for folks that are looking at the YouTube recording, I'm going to paste this into the description down below. For other folks, you can just click that in the resources pod on the left-hand side if you're watching this live. But it'll have all of the notes that we're talking about here, including this bold, because that's how it should be. Okie doke. So, interestingly enough, when I did go through my notes, I went and grabbed some Site of the Day examples about photography, and it really brought to mind, I guess, 2 points to me pretty clearly. One is that photos are so integral to websites these days. Ali Pordelli, in fact, the fellow who's there on chat, he worked with me in the building out of the starter files that we delivered in June. So when you go to the welcome screen, there are some free starter files that you can use to basically learn how Muse functions. And he and I did some shopping. We looked at sites like Squarespace. And interestingly enough, there's very little content on sites like these. They're very heavy on images. And even if you're selling, doesn't really matter, if you're selling kitchen equipment, like the site that is Site of the Day today, photography is becoming so important. The other point that I guess I wanted to make is back in the day when I did this 2 years ago, a year ago, we would talk about specific widgets and specific behaviors that you could do to integrate photography into your site. And we're going to cover that a little bit today. But I kind of can't emphasize enough, it's so amazing to see how a tool like Muse in the hands of designers, without a designer speccing it to a developer, that designer being one and the same and able to experiment with all of these elements, it's amazing to see the creative ways that people integrate photographs. And I've pulled up some of the site of the days to try to talk about that. Some of them require tricks, and we're probably due for a jam session. How did you do that session? Y'all are welcome to tell me if you think there's value to this, but I probably should almost create a form in Site of the Day where as people come in and have questions about how things are done, if you could log it somewhere and I can collect it up, and every few months we can dissect some of these Site of the Day sites. It's really amazing to see the work that people are doing with built-in Muse functionality. I noticed that Chris Kellett just joined as well today. Both Chris and Ali build out widgets that extend the functionality of Muse. They also do tutorials. Chris Kellett's company 123 Muse is all about teaching how to work with Muse and how to extend it using widgets that he develops. I'm going to show off some of both of their widgets today. Some of it is built-in functionality that you can achieve through a little bit of blood, sweat, and tears. Some is by buying some of these widgets or help and support from some of these community members. And the combination, I think, is just amazing. So let's look at some of the sites that are out there. I have to kind of beg for forgiveness. Ali knows this. I knew that this site used a lot of Ali's cookie widgets. And I have a policy, which is that for Site of the Day, we really don't want to show templates anymore. We did early on because the best designers of Muse tended to be folks that were building templates for other users. But for years now, we've really tried to stay away from templates. This is honestly one of Ali Pordelli's templates that someone used and did a beautiful job putting their own content in it. But if you love it, it happens to be something you could buy from cookie.com. But it's got some really interesting approaches. So this is an integration of widgets to extend functionality. There are things like just rollovers and such that he's got some JavaScript effects applied to it. But just the way that this main image sort of hovers and pans and zooms adds some interest to the design. I can come in and navigate to, for example, the gallery. And in the gallery, you'll see some other examples of widgets that Ali has built out that allow you to deal with a lot of intensive imagery. So with this widget, I think it's called the Fluid widget, you're able to come in and go to subcategories. So I may want to just look at kitchen sites, timber sites. You'll notice the JavaScript transitions that he's using. It may be CSS transitions that are transitioning between these subcategories as I click between them. So kind of that shuffle effect and that zoom effect. And then clicking on any one of these objects allows you to sort of zoom around at a detail level and see the content of that image. So this is sort of in its extreme, a template that you can buy that has lots of widgets that are all ready. And I think, again, I'm happy to hear feedback from you as designers. It costs money for the Creative Cloud, some monthly fee, let's say $50 for everything or $15 for Muse. Alongside that, folks like Muse Themes and Cookie and 123 Muse do charge annual fees or individual widget fees. Personally, I think it's worth it. As a designer, to be able to take a layout or take a component that's delivered as part of a template and really extend that, I think is valuable. Some folks say, hey, Muse team, why aren't you doing all this? Why do you keep nickel-and diming us with widgets on the side? But to be really honest, the explosive way that widgets have grown in the last, what's only been 2 years, is really because of the combination of actually Lance Bouchard back in the day exposing what he named, it's his fault, the Moo Cow, which is the Muse configurable widget, in combination with just these creative web trends that people in the community like Chris Kellett and Ali Pordelli have leveraged in order to build out this content. So this is a over-the-top first example, and there are some other that are here that I did want to call to that are using less templates and extended widget functionality and more built-in functionality with the site. So one trend that you're seeing an awful lot is this background video. And there are different ways for you to get that. It is not something built into Muse. But if you go to, for example, there's a site called Nomad Dreamers. And Chris Kellett and I actually did this, I don't know, maybe it was 6 months ago. And my intention here was to really let people understand how widgets in the community can extend functionality. And it has 5 widgets that poor Chris has to support for me. Thank you, Chris. That are free. And their intention is to really just let users understand how you can extend the basic functionality of Muse using the widgets. So there's one for a background video. You can scroll to that place. If you click Get It Here, it's going to take you to the widget directory where you can preview that widget in action on the Nomad site and download it. But this is an example of a background video. There are different background videos. In all honesty, my intention was to not have Chris make the best widgets ever. It was to have them be pretty good. So folks like Chris and Ali and Muse Themes and Muse Grid can come in and do a better job. So for each of these widget categories, if you click on a link, it'll show you all of the widgets that are available for that. And I love this. This is showing that our community is vibrant, and at a variety of price ranges and functionality, you can add a background video to your site. So the Nomad Dreamers example is a full screen background video. It's actually always there, and you'll see that I expose it from time to time. Other examples, so this Croissanteria in New York City, for example, I believe that video stops playing, or they're at least covering it up if it's a full screen background video. I don't see it for the rest of the site. Now, when we're selecting Site of the Day sites, we've kind of erred lately on the side of not doing a million portfolio sites by visual designers, but more real world, real functional sites. And this is the thing about rich imagery, whether it's video or photography, that I'm finding is pretty amazing. We'll probably all get sick of it pretty soon, but you'll notice that so many sites have just big, beautiful images, much less text, really giving a feeling for the site using photography. All right, I'm going to go on a little bit more. This is a site, it's in French, but it is specifically, actually, I pause. Well, I pause for a couple reasons. The main reason is that Site of the Day is a living entity, and when we select a site for Site of the Day, we never really know what's going to be updated about it and how it'll change over time. And folks like Le Mans and this website in France have looser definitions of clothing. So I'm going to skip to the next site, but it's a wonderful example of a dance troupe that is using imagery and interactive elements within the site. Helen Sear, here's another beautiful photography site. She's not showing every single photograph she's ever done. She's a writer and a photographer from what I can tell. She's just using it to embellish her work and really just create a feeling for her site. Nothing really whiz-bang here. It's pretty gentle and standard. But notice how she's got some nice subtle effects. She's got a beautiful image here that as I scroll, there's a scroll effect applied to it. So it is moving at a slower speed of scroll than the rest of the site, which is why the bottom of the site comes up more quickly. And then at the same time, she's using a scroll effect at the top of the page to fade in persistent navigation that comes up. I just find it lovely. And as we mature into things like scroll effects and additional behaviors that visual designers have and don't need a coder to help them out with, I love when that subtle effect really comes into play. So really, this is not screaming scroll effects to you, but it subtly transitions in here. I can come in and jump between each of her categories. So she's got sub-navigation, good imagery, so great images to work with. As I roll over the image, I just get a subtle rollover effect where it's probably just an opacity definition here that's changing the opacity of the image that allows me to jump in and look at the detail view. When I'm in this detail view, notice how it's just a really lovely structure to the design here. So I've got an image here and I can read about it, and that's there on the left, but very subtly on the right, I have the ability to have the thumbnails for that image. So it's not impacting her main design on the right. It's very subtly there on the left. The beauty of a simple trigger target widget or a composition widget, or even our gallery, slideshow gallery widget, is that you can put thumbnails wherever you want on the page. They don't have to sit just next to your gallery or your image that you're working with. Another one here, not really sure why I pulled it up, but oh yeah, I know why. I thought this is a really subtle way to have a collection of images. So I know I personally don't have much of an imagination. My kids' rowing team has 12 coaches now, and every coach wants their photo in their bio. I would love to take an approach like this, because what you're doing is giving a visual representation of a lot of images. You can roll over each, which allows you to understand that you can click into any of these. And when doing so, it comes in and gives you that detailed view that you can go to the next instance. So a really nice, gentle way using images to let you know that there's more content there, having that rollover state to jump into a detail view, and then using a lightbox. And that lightbox has a previous and next button that's taking you to additional instances of the next card, the next person, and the ability to close that out when you're done. So a very compact implementation using photography in a very visual way to show a whole lot of information. As I mentioned, I need to remember to come and refer to this because I think it's a great idea. Let's see. This is an example of, it's a food truck. Nothing incredibly high end, but what a wonderful feeling that just the landing page in this image gives. Now, we've all seen graphic designers showing their tools of the trade. I'm kind of really sick of portfolio sites that start out with all of the tools of the trade, but isn't this a fun adaptation of that idea? So you've got empanadas, a food truck, showing the tools of their trade. And I've got this nice full screen image that as I scroll down will take me into some of their other information. Now again, notice the approach that they're using here. We'll dig into, I'm going to do you guys a favor because we're blowing through a lot of stuff over 20 minutes. If you have questions about specific sites here and how they've approached it, let's dig in and I'll show you a little bit more visibly. But let me see if I can talk you through some of this. We've got a pinned navigation here. This might be using pinning. It could be scroll effects set to 0 so that navigation stays on top, is persistent. As I scroll down, I have this full screen image. It's just placed there. So nothing special there. It's 100% width image. So as I press and drag, that image is going to scale to fill the container while keeping its proportions of height to width. As I scroll down, I've got, of course, the reason why we're here, which is their menu. They're talking about something in Spanish. And then as I progress, I've got a little empanada coming up. So I've got an approach. This is actually kind of funny and it's probably broken. So notice how there's this checkerboard here. Chances are it should be 100% width tile. So by creating a little section that repeats, you're usually good, but that's looking like it just got broken. It should be a little bit more like the part on top. But notice how that empanada stays in the background. Again, make a list of things that you're not really sure that I'm talking about here, and I'm happy to show it to you. But this is kind of one of the oldest tricks that's hard to figure out in the books of Muse, which is how to define background fills that are pinned in the background. Notice there's this one shot of an empanada. As I progress, I betcha as I move down here, maybe not. There's just the one, but quite often you'll see it's almost like a slideshow behavior where that image is going to change as you progress down on the page. What else do we have? Another just rich visual site. And we'll let this guy load a little bit. It's loading from Europe for sure. Give that guy a second. Here's another one that's a product. This is kind of a classic portfolio site. And as I mentioned, most of what we get for Site of the Day are visual designers experimenting with Muse and showing off their skills using Muse. So we get a lot of portfolio sites. The majority of what are sent to us are portfolio sites. I thought this one was fun and playful because it's integrating some of this hand-drawn feeling. So it's, hand-drawn arrows, but a typeface that's actually a web font that's going to load quickly, but it's got that hand-drawn feel to it. And then I loved the way the designer here is integrating their images in with the design. So this is using a slideshow. It's a transparent background slideshow, and some adorable illustrations here that are just repeating through that slideshow. So kind of subtle. You can't really stop and go back to anything. There's no navigation for it, but just really clean and simple. That continues. This is a widget that you can find in the widget directory. It allows you to do a before and after for images. So you can actually take two different images side by side. Let's say you're an architect and you show the before and after versions of your building. This is a pretty dramatically before and after example, but I've seen a lot of photographers that use this. There's one site that a man who does photo retouching, and he shows the before and after versions of images that he retouched for models, and it's amazing to see the work side by side in that way. Here we've got some logos, again that same kind of approach, and then a nice little light box in essence for his video work. This is using a Vimeo widget, probably the one built into Muse, although I can't guarantee it. You can always go full screen if you'd like. And continuing through, so a whole lot of content that is reflected using these little scrolling examples. That's probably enough for now. This is a pure photographer's website, and there's a number of those where you can step in and look at their galleries and their work. And to that end, I did want to come in and show a couple of widgets in the community that I think are really powerful for different reasons. So I'm going to stop over and stop talking and see what you guys are talking about. And then we'll jump into the application and some of the examples. Chris, of course, is filling the airways, talking about lots of things. Oh, his house. That's really great. Thanks, Chris. I appreciate that. Way to stay on topic. Yeah, no worries. And specific questions, everybody seems to be enamored with where Chris lives, so we're good. I'm going to keep going. Okay, I'm going to keep going. I don't think I've missed much here. Let's go into the application. And it's always swell when you've got the people that make widgets sitting over your shoulder as you try to decipher how to work with a widget. Chris Kellett, Mr. Kellett, let's see if I can pull this up. Give him a cameo moment here. If he'll stop talking about where he lives, perhaps. Although he can do what he wants. So 123 Muse. I'm just going to say 123 Muse in Lightroom. And this is a widget that Chris offers. I think he and I figured out that the link right here is broken, but we're going to fix that pretty quickly. So I'm going to go to try this again. If I go to 123 Muse LR Deck. Yeah. Okay. So on 123muse.com, Chris Kellett is selling help and support and learn content. So it was an online magazine, now it's online articles that allow you to learn about stuff. His brother, Dan, is a big Lightroom fanatic and a terrific photographer. And Chris is incredibly capable as both a developer and a designer. He discovered Muse a long time ago through the development side of the world as a business catalyst extension developer, and really moved over into our side of the world, and we're happy to have him. And the thing that I think is interesting about this is that he has a deep understanding, as I mentioned, of how to develop out widgets, what the world of code is like, and its value with Muse, because he uses Muse a lot. And he has a whole supplementary article, educational article about how to use Lightroom and Muse together. And Chris, I was going to mention this privately, but I'll mention it publicly. In some ways, this is called the Lightroom Deck, but it also could be called the Flickr Deck to a large extent, because the workflow that Chris is advocating, which is wonderful, is if you are a photographer that has a ton of imagery, let's say you want to use Muse and you have clients, you are a photographer and you have clients and you're constantly updating your image gallery. A lot of folks through the years, I mean, Chris and I have lived through this probably for the last, 8 years of our life, around when does Muse need to really have a back-end content management system, and when is it overkill for a visual designer? What are the goals you have around dynamic data within your site? And having lived through that whole world, I'm personally a firm believer that we don't want to get into the content management system business. I think that being able to pick the best CMS for the job, for your client, and have it couple beautifully with Muse, maybe not directly tied together, but loosely tied, I think is phenomenal. And this is a perfect example of that. If you're a photographer, Lightroom is an extraordinary tool for managing, organizing, taking care of your content. Having a plugin within Lightroom that allows you to easily upload the content to a cloud service is wonderful. And what Chris talks you through is how to use Lightroom and build out, using a plugin, build out a Flickr account. So Flickr allows you to have, according to Chris, 1 terabyte of content, I think for free, on your Flickr account. So you'll use Lightroom to manage, organize, define, tag everything, your very large volume of images, and you'll upload them to Flickr because think of it just as your cloud storage, and that's all that really matters there. From there, I'll show you the next step. So within Muse, and I'm going to cheat for a second, not very subtly here. I kind of want to take this from the beginning, but I do need to cheat for a second. I had to steal it from the beautiful rowing website that I manage for my kids' rowing team. So all I'm going to do for that is, let's just leave that open. And I'm going to start from scratch because I want you to see this. So this is an example of a pretty complex widget. As I mentioned, we're still only halfway hour into this. If y'all want to go back into some of the basics of Muse, how do you work with a gallery? How do you create a lightbox widget? Shout out specific questions you have. I'm going pretty deep into a photography widget from a third party, but I'm happy to go back to the basic app if we want to. Y'all are in charge. I'm just dancing as fast as I can based on what you tell me. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new site and go to the landing page. And what I'd like to do is just have a really good gallery of images. Now my assumption, and this will not be the case for what I'm about to show you, but my assumption is that I have a lot of Flickr collections, that I might have, who knows, maybe it's my family photo album and I want to show it over 20 years. With a terabyte of data on Flickr, that's a lot of space for images, and being able to organize and categorize and tag all of those images in Lightroom can be really powerful before I push it up. But then allowing you to easily parse through so much content within Muse or within a website you build within Muse is also powerful. So I'm going to come in and grab the Lightroom Deck widget, and I'll press and drag it on the canvas. Now, widgets are kind of interesting. Chris and Ali are both seriously guilty of building out so much functionality in a widget. And isn't it amazing that Lance is with us today, because Lance enabled it. They've found many backdoors that Lance probably never wanted them to find, to come in and extend the functionality of the application. So folks that build widgets would love to have even more hooks into our application, and we are looking at ways we can do that, but there are a lot of hooks as it stands. So I've gone in and I've placed this on the canvas. What you need to know about this widget is what I see here will not really affect what happens in the browser. So if I pull down on File to preview the page in the browser, I'm going to see actually something. That's interesting. Didn't know you already had it hooked up, Chris. But it's reflecting not really what I just dragged on the canvas, but it's using that as a feeder to build what I'm seeing on the page. So let's come in and change these to my own set. What you'll notice here that takes a little getting used to is notice what Chris has done, which I think is pretty terrific, is he's reflecting answers to questions that have been defined here a little bit. So you notice it's got a Flickr ID and a photo set of none. And he's gone in and defined certain attributes. Now, to do that definition, if I bring up this widget, you'll see there's a whole lot of something going on here. It's a pretty complex widget. And this is where having Chris's, not only his widget, but his extensive tutorial to explain how to use this thing helps immensely. He's got a number of videos with his brother Dan that I watched yesterday. But you can come in and define certain attributes. So I'm going to go back to the site that I have, which is just a whole lot of rowing stuff. And I'm going to come into my silly little Flickr widget that I put down here. So this is just a standard low branding Flickr widget. And in it I've got a Flickr ID and a photo set defined. So I'm going to come in and copy that to the clipboard. I could go to Flickr and grab that just as easily. and come back here into Chris's Lightroom deck, or his Flickr deck, as I'd like to call it. I'm going to try to do myself a favor here. See how it says photo set ID set to none? Took me a minute, but this is some of where our widget developers are really pushing what they can do within a widget. I can come in, you'll notice I want to use a photo set, and when I check that box, it enables this field for me where I can come in and paste in the set that I defined and my Flickr ID. So I'm going to cut the Flickr ID out of there and just leave the set. So the other widget accepted a different format. This one I can just come in and separate the two. And now I'm pointing to my own gallery. Now, in addition to that first widget, there's two others you can drag onto the canvas. One for icons, and this allows you to customize or define. Notice here on the left, everything's set to nothing. Now, in Chris's little pack, he includes some sample starter icons. So I can come in pretty quickly here and go and grab, for example, he's got the toolbox icon there. I was going to quickly grab, I said to myself, give me a second. There you go, sample icons. I think we said we were going to grab toolbar. I'm just going to grab a few of these. There's show tool, which I just grabbed the wrong one. Tool show. We'll do a little tool hide. So he gives you a starter set of icons, and notice how I'm seeing a representation of any of the icons that I'm applying. This is the magic that Chris has built in. As I'm adding these can be my own icon sets if I'd like. I'm getting a representation on the canvas. The truth is this little icon manager panel will never show up. Chris, I'm not really sure, and you could tell me later, where the separator icon is, because I couldn't find it in your collection. And Muse is working a little hard thinking about this. Hopefully not too hard. I'm going to give it a second. Talk amongst yourselves while I spin here. Connect also crashed on me this morning, so we might be able to blame it on that. I'm going to check and see, is everybody good? All is good. Okay. Let's see if I've killed my application. Let's just see. No, we're back. Okay, I'm just going to leave it with a couple because it's not all that critical. And let's just take a look at where we are. There's another one for pagination that will allow you, and this is really the power, I can't say it enough, of this tool, is when you have lots and lots of content, trying to manage and organize that. So all I did is said, here's my Flickr collection. Here's my Flickr ID. Here's the collection I'd like to work with. And I haven't done anything to tag things intelligently. But you'll notice that I know there's 33 images. I can jump between those images and see exactly what I need to. I've got a close box graphic. If we go back to Chris's instance, do I still have that guy up? He had the ability to tag the collections here, so I can come in and see individual albums if I had multiple albums. So, and, you know, again, to reinforce, I don't have to touch this ever again. I don't have to open Muse. I do not have to republish. All I have to do is go to Lightroom and push up to Flickr any edits or updates, and they're going to dynamically happen. Now, if you compare this to us building out a whole custom CMS that you would have to force your clients to deal with, I would much rather say to my clients, hey, anytime you've got new photos, go ahead and push them up to Flickr, and the website will automatically update if you do it in the way that I tell you around the sets and such that I define. So, question for Chris, can you add dynamically new sets without changing Muse and republishing? Or do you have to kind of predefine those sets and then in Flickr populate or change the pre-existing sets? So is there any dynamic nature to adding and removing sets, or do those have to be predefined? My assumption is predefined and you can come populate them. I guess this follow-on question would be, let's say I define a set for November, December, and January, and I wait to populate them. Would the widget show empty containers for sets that you hadn't populated yet, or is there any ability to just not show an empty set? So curious about that. This is why we call it a jam session. I get to learn as much as you guys do. Okay, so that's one widget. I did have, let's go to a very basic widget that I showed you, and that's the Nomad Dreamers Carousel widget. Again, built by Chris Kellett, based on my request. I think I made him do it. I'm not sure. Maybe he suggested it. Nomad Dreamers. I'm going to pop on over. I'm going to click on Gallery. I'm going to go click to get the widget. I can preview that Nomad Dreamers or just get the widget. It downloads here. I'm going to show it in the Finder. At that point, if I double click, it will probably open it up in Muse, but I have 2 versions of Muse running on my system. So I'm going to drag it onto the shipping version of Muse. I'm also doing some work with our beta release. So I now have added it there. It shows up here in my library. And I can come in and take a look at the Carousel Gallery, press and drag it on the canvas. So again, this is a very simple instance. Now, something interesting happened with this widget. If I come into the character styles, not that, the paragraph styles, more likely, or graphic styles. Okay. When I look at the graphic styles, graphic and paragraph styles are another hook that widget developers are using to extend functionality. So what it allows you to do is come in and style the way your next and previous buttons are going to look here, and it will apply to these objects here. So I can change the look and feel as I'm working. The other thing I want to do is come to this widget here, and let's go grab some images. Let's just see. Actually, I'm forgetting because this thing might have changed on me. Let me just see. She said to herself, self. All right, Mr. Kellett, how do I add images again? Yes, I see you've raised your hand. Use the image loader. So if I go back to my library, the image loader, I think he means the place gun, basically. So if I say I want to come in and import some new images, let's see if I'm right. I'm going to pick something safe, and that's a number of Facebook images that I've used for some of our last jam sessions. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's try 6. Yes, Mr. Kellett, are you going to tell me I'm going to do this wrong? All right. Hold on. I'm switching back. Yeah, I know. I can hardly see it. It's stuck here in the corner, this little widget. Okay. He's saying on the upper left-hand corner, this has gotten awful subtle on me. So in the upper left-hand corner of the design, there's this little icon. And this is indicating that this is how you're going to add to this widget. In the flyout, I can come in and add the files I'd like to. I'm back on track now, thank you. And I'll go back to that safe set of Facebook images. And I'm going to grab some individual images. Now notice I can also apply an image link that allows you to add, in essence, a hyperlink if you want them to be able to click into. I'm just going to populate this with a random set. I'll show you how that link works as well. We'll go ahead and do all 7. Goodness knows what some of these images are, but it's pretty safe. Okay. And I can come in and add a link here. I'm going to assume this is going to be www.adobe.com. And with that done, again, notice I've got things on my canvas, but they don't really, these are for position only. If I come to this flyout, I can decide what is the separation distance between my image sets here. Medium is fine. I can define the image width and height. I'll take a look at it and see if I like what I see. And then I'll hit autoplay. And then I'll come in and preview this widget. All right, it's a little odd because it's not necessarily meant to be. In fact, bear with me. Let's try to change this. So I like my Facebook images are much wider. So let's come in and say that we'll make this more like 600. And for good measure, I'm going to drag this out. It may or may not matter. I've lost track of where we landed on this. All right, it seems to does matter. And notice I can click through each of these images, and for the first one that I defined a link, I could probably click in and go to the location by clicking on it. I've got my previous and next button. So it's just a very simple image gallery. It's an excuse or an opportunity to show lots of images in a very small space. I can change the background fill. I can change the look of my buttons. So just a nice little example there. Let's see. Let me show you another one that I'm going to hope I can get my brain to the other side of. All right, I'm going to start it, and I might regret it, so let's see how it goes. But with Ali and Chris, like I said, I'm in the mood for a Muse jam. The banjos inspired me. So let's talk about how, I know it comes up a lot, where people want to have a gallery of images, and then they want to have a little tray or ability to select from sets of images. And I'm feeling cobwebs in my brain about this on the back end, so watch closely and bail me out when I get stuck. I'm going to go into the widget library, so brand new basic Muse. And I'm going to come into the slideshow. I think it'll be fine. I'm going to grab a basic thumbnail slideshow, press and drag it on the canvas. We added a wonderful feature not that long ago where I can come into a widget and I can say clear all the dumb styling you've done and clear all the widget contents that you've done, so you just get a basic container. I'm going to get rid of captions, previous and next, because I really don't need it for what we're doing right now. And I'm going to go grab some images. Let's pick on one of our starter file image set. We've got exposure. So exposure is actually a really good photography website starter file. It's built into Muse. If you are in the world, let me go ahead and show you this. If you're in the land of English speaking, if you pull down on help and go to the welcome screen, probably when you're not in the middle of trying to open a file. So in the welcome screen here, there are starter files. If you happen to not be in North America, you probably don't see this. This was a test that was done. The other place you can go to get to this starter file, which is geared towards photography, is to go simply to, if you go to muse.adobe.com, in the tutorials area, I'm going to go ahead and paste this into the chat. There is a link to those starter designs. Now, the really great part about it, if you're a teacher or if you're new to Muse, is that each of these starter files, when you click on the preview, they've got a bunch of tooltips with Dani Beaumont herself in about 2 or 3 minutes, simply explaining how to customize out this starter file in a quick little video here. So it's a really good, quick way to teach and learn. I'm going to paste that into chat because I said I would. Thanks, Chris. Appreciate your support. Did that go? Yeah. Okay. So that's a link to the starters if you don't have them in your welcome screen. Let's go in and grab some images now from the starters. I was going to pick on those in exposure. Let's just grab these. I'm going to copy them. Say open, and I'm just going to notice if I click and release in the main hero area, it's going to create a thumbnail for each of them. And the way that it filled that container is controlled here under new hero or new thumbnail. Fill frame proportionately is always a good way to go. It's going to trim height or width based on the image content. I can now take this guy, and what I want to do is move it down to the bottom. So I'm going to make sort of an image strip, and I'm going to kind of put it down here. This is where my cobwebs are hitting, so bear with me. So I've got one little slideshow, and I really like it. Swell. I could come into this image set and using things like the spacings panel, I can cause space to occur between my thumbnails or not. Let's just see. The other option is to select all these guys. This is where the cobwebs are hitting. Oh yeah, it's gutter, silly girl. This can allow padding on all the sides of the objects, but if I come in here to gutter, height and width, I can get some decent spacing. And these use sibling editing. So if you go to the flyout, you'll notice it says edit together somewhere here, all the way at the bottom. Edit Together said that anything I do to a sibling will be applied to everybody else. So I may think that I really want kind of a longer, thinner thumbnail, and that would be pretty swell. And I can do that by changing one of the thumbnails, and then all the thumbnails will adjust accordingly. So I'm going to get to where I've got a nice stack like that. Okay, I think that's magical in every way. And I could play with these settings. But as we mentioned, we're talking about photography, and I might have a ton of information. I'm going to go ahead and press and drag a second instance of this slideshow. Or not. Let's try that again. To be fair, I'm doing a full screen recording, and I'm running Connect, and I'm running Muse and duplicating full slideshows. So Muse is allowed to get a little slow under these circumstances. I'm going to come in again to this one and clear all widget content. And this time I'll grab a different set of images. Let's go to my other favorite, which is Kava, because we know I love coffee. And I'll grab these images. And I will apply them to my second little slideshow. And we'll get rid of one because it doesn't fit. Okay, so I now have these two slideshows. This is where my brain is going to hurt for a minute. But what I have seen is that, it's truly going to hurt. What I want to do is place these guys into trigger targets is my assumption. So I'm going to put this to the people that are smarter than I am. How can I have two sets of slideshows and have a single tray that allows me to jump between one or the other? I believe I can do it by way of trigger target composition widget. But any feedback from the peanut gallery? All right, Gutter, we got that. Ollie, Chris, you're on the line. So the question is, if you have, let's say you have more than one gallery and you want to have a tray below it that allows you to select between different sets. What I want to be able to do, it's not that hard. I think I'm making it harder than it has to be. All right, tabs. Yeah, one could do it in tabs. That's the 1, 2, 3, I think, Muse grid approach. So if I come into a widget here, I can take a tabbed panel. It's one way to get there. And I might have, let's just see if we can get here quickly. I'm going to get rid of the third tab. I'm going to keep these around a little bit, make them a little more spacious, a little more broad. I could go ahead and remove all the styling and stuff, but I don't want to bother right now. And with this, I could come in and just fill this container. I could call this Gallery 1. Call this guy Gallery 2. This is not the one I was thinking, but I can't think of it, so it'll bail me out at least. There is another widget style that I'm going to show you from Muse Themes towards the end here. Let me grab that, make these a little beefier. And what I could do if I wanted to is come in and change these so that they're nearly invisible. So I'm going to make them white. And at least that one, that's okay. You'll get the gist. I'm going to come in and select this container, and I'm going to fill it with an image from my set. Now, original size will just not do. How about scale to fill? So I get a sense of the image. And notice that position here where you're pinning the image is going to affect how that image fills the container. So what is the starting point? You can get more, based on each image, get more pleasing content. Now notice it has the same background. In order for that to change, I'm going to want to come in and come out to the root here, I think. Let's see. I want to make sure I'm not using Edit Together on this guy. It may allow me to vary it. Let's just see. So I've got this one. Let's come to this guy here. I'm going to grab a different background fill. And we'll go back out to the next. Exposure, backgrounds, looks good. Did that work? No, it didn't. So I have to figure out how to turn off edit. There you go, edit together. Why didn't you show me that just a moment ago, people? All right, one last time, we'd come in, change that background. So the thing about widgets is you really, really want to see what state you're in. And if you're not seeing what you want, hit escape to come up a level, or double click to drill down more deeply. Now I'm confusing myself. I think I'm missing a kava. Try that guy. Okay. So I need to change my states a little bit, but the idea would be that gallery 1 could live here. When I drag this into the container, even though it's bigger than the container, it's going to grow that container to fit my content. Slip over to gallery 2, which needs to change its rollover states, but you guys get the point. And I drop it in there. So this is one approach for having content that's varying, or having extensive widgets within widgets, and this feeling of really having compact space used for a whole lot of content using what's built in within Muse. All right, we're going to do one more because I thought it was a nice widget as well, and give a shout out to Muse Themes. So this one, if I go out here, let's just see in my library, as a nice, just lovely, clean widget. And it's the full screen thumbnail gallery. Press and drag this onto the canvas. Now again, you don't get much of anything. It's kind of the magic of complicated widgets. What Steve Harris will explain to you is these two look like this for a reason, because somehow in the code, you have to make sure that this gets loaded before this does. And when you stack them in this way, that happens. I don't know. It's all Lance's fault if you ask me. In the first widget, I can come in and configure how all of the attributes are handled. In the second widget, I can come in and grab some images. So as we've done before, let's go into starters and grab some good looking starter files. We'll just do a few. So I'm going to grab 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 more. Actually, there's merit for me doing more than just a few, so bear with me if you don't mind. I'm going to enable these additional sets because I want to show you something. And I'm going to go grab a few more images. Talk amongst yourselves. I'll be right back. About the weather. Okay, let's go to, I forget which one I just did, so let's go to my name and just grab a bunch of these. I know you have a feature request, which is, why can't I get one of those cute little folders that allows me to go grab a whole bunch in a widget? Kindly enough, Lance is not full-time on widgets anymore, so bugging him will really not get you anything. But it is a feature request that many people would like to have met. Okay, let's try just a couple more. If y'all are sleeping, you gotta wake up. Don't make me play the banjos again. Okay. I think 9 might get us there, and I might have some repeats here. Okay, so I have many images now. And here's where the magic happens. If I come in and preview in browser, I get this nice full screen image, very unformatted, but I could come in and style out the text here. But here's what I really like. I can go previous and next, but notice how sweet this little gallery picker here is. It's using a widget that's using some JavaScript to make this thing happen, but it's just a really nice way. You can imagine if you had a very long sequence, looks like I didn't fill the last one in, but if you had a pretty decent sized sequence with all 10 or 9 images, you're just giving them a nice experience to come in there and select from them. All right, top of the hour. How did that happen? I am going to switch over to the last area. You need to tell me if this met your requirements. If it didn't, you have to come into the chat and tell us why, because we have to learn. And I cannot emphasize enough, if you want to see what's new in Muse, what's coming down the pipe, go to the private beta. I'm going to give you the URL. museprerelease.com. It'll probably inform you as to why we've been busy and we're a little absent-minded because we got a lot going on. We're also both Ali Pordelli, Chris Kellett, and the Muse Themes folks. I'm dragging all of those poor souls to Los Angeles to join me at the beginning of next month for our Max user conference. If you cannot come, many of the sessions will be recorded. Steve Harris is doing one on tips and tricks, power tips and tricks. Chris Kellett is doing one on widgets. And Ali Pordelli is doing one on how to build out content for multiple screens. And all three of those sessions, if you can't come to Max, you can probably come to Facebook. I will try to make sure folks make those available. Those recordings will be available online to see all three of them in action, and not me for a change. As I mentioned, as of Max, I'm going to take a sabbatical. I'm going to actually get married the weekend after Max. So I will be scarce through the end of the year, but these guys are going to carry the torch. If there are topics you'd like to have covered, it's not my problem because I told you I won't be here, but I can forward it on to some of the other folks on the Muse team. We have some ideas for series that we're going to, thank you, Lance. We have some ideas for different topics that we will do for jam sessions while I'm gone. But thank you everyone for your time. Thank you for Muse recording 169 in the can. And we hope to speak to you soon. I'm going to go grab the recording link and I'll put it in here. So don't go away if you want it. If not, we'll catch you next time.